Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of Talking Films Online. Today we have with us Subhankar Bhattacharya, who will lead the discussion on the film 36 Chowringhee Lane. Subhankar grew up in Kolkata and went to St. Stephen's College, Delhi, to pursue his graduation in English literature. He returned to Kolkata to pursue his MA and M.Phil in English literature from Jadavpur University. For the M.Phil, he wrote a dissertation on the representation of the body in Shakespeare's plays under the supervision of Professor Emeritus Supriya Chaudhuri. He has studied at Oxford University and the Warburg University in London and is currently pursuing research at the University of Cambridge and is a member of Wolfson College. He was an observer for Aparna Sen's latest feature film, The Rapist, during its final schedule in Delhi. He has written on 36 Chowringhee Lane and has a keen research interest in Indian English language films. Welcome once again, Subhankar, and over to you. Are you there, Subhankar? Can you hear me?
Ma'am, there is a mistake. The thing is, I'm Subhankar Datta. I'm Subhankar's friend. I think Subhankar yet to join.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we both share the same name. I think he is yet to join.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
I'm also sorry. I should have said that.
Yeah, I wish. It's okay. We'll repeat it. Hi, Bashwati. Good to see you here.
Hi. Good to be here. I'm just catching up on the last few minutes of the film. So
okay. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Isa, he has joined. Subhankar has joined.
Subhankar, okay. Subhankar, Subhankar Bhattacharya, is he here? Yes. Okay. Yeah, Subhankar, there was a little bit of comedy of errors here. I introduced you just now because I saw Subhankar there until he told me he's Subhankar Datta and not Subhankar Bhattacharya.
No worries.
So let me repeat my welcome to you. Welcome, Subhankar. Subhankar Bhattacharya grew up in Kolkata and went to St. Stephen's College, Delhi, to pursue his graduation in English literature. He returned to Kolkata to pursue his MA and M.Phil in English literature from Jadavpur University. For the M.Phil, he wrote a dissertation on the representation of the body in Shakespeare's plays under the supervision of Professor Emeritus Supriya Chaudhuri. He has studied at Oxford University and the Warburg University in London and is currently pursuing research at the University of Cambridge and is a member of Wolfson College. He was an observer for Aparna Sen's latest feature film, The Rapist, during its final schedule in Delhi. He has written on 36 Chowringhee Lane and has a keen research interest in Indian English language films. Welcome once again, Subhankar, and over to you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? I'm just checking that I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming that most of us here have watched the film. So nonetheless, I'll run through a plot summary very quickly. I won't go into great detail because, but there are certain points I want to make while talking about the story, because I think there are it's one of her, it's Aparna Sen's directorial debut, obviously, and we all know that. And she was working on the script for about 3 or 4 years before she finally directed the film. So it's a very carefully plotted script, and every time I see it, I've seen it a number of times now, I realize how sort of densely and carefully plotted it is. Shudipto, can you mute yourself, please? It's causing a little disturbance.
Yeah, I think I've muted already. Is it creating any difficulty?
It's creating some feedback. Ma'am, could you just mute everyone, please, except myself?
I have.
Oh, perfect. Perfect, perfect. So yes, so this film came out, it released on 29th August 1981, and Aparna Sen began scripting it around 1977. And the genesis of the film is, yeah, it's a story in itself, which is talked about at various places. I'll just go over that briefly because that will feed into some aspects of the film under discussion. So Aparna Sen debuted as an actress in Satyajit Ray's Teen Konna in the Samapti segment, opposite Soumitra Chatterjee. And she played Mrinmoyi. This was a Tagore story, of course. And it took her almost 15 or 16 years to realize that just exclusively acting in films was not something that she was enjoying, because the kind of cinema that was rife in the mainstream space in Bengal, which is primarily where she worked. She did about 4 Hindi films. The division in Bengal, the division between what we know as commercial and art house cinema was fairly stark at that time. So given that her father was Chidananda Dasgupta, who co-founded the Calcutta Film Society with Satyajit Ray, she was brought up on a diet of mainly European classics. So that is not the kind of cinema, by and large, that she was acting in. Although I must say that she's done some very intelligent mainstream films as well, where she's, and especially where she's demonstrated great comic flair. And she's always maintained that she's enjoyed acting in comedies more than, you know, the sentimental farces that sort of ruled Bengali screen for decades, not in the left of mainstream space, but in the more resolutely the kind of films that keep the industry sort of spokes running, as it were. So there she was, and she was actually shooting in Bombay for a film called Iman Dharam. This was 1976, early 77, and she was in the makeup room, and she was waiting for the lights to be changed or something, for a change of set. And she had a sort of a crisis of conscience, and she realized that she couldn't just carry on acting in these what she sort of characterizes as brain dead sort of films. So she started writing, and she actually went back to her childhood. And she was thinking about the Anglo-Indian teachers that taught them when she was a student at the Modern High School for Girls. And she was particularly influenced by this teacher of hers called Miss Colt. She also had a teacher called Miss Stoneham, and not Violet Stoneham, a different Stoneham. And she had a teacher, an English lady who was married to a Bengali, so she called her Miss Banerjee, but she of course had originally an English surname. So she was very close to all these teachers, and particularly Miss Colt, who taught them Shakespeare and who was gently derided by the students. And that struck a chord in Aparna Sen's heart, and she actually began writing what she characterized as a short story. And then it slowly started resembling a screenplay. And she sort of co-wrote it with a friend, and she showed a draft to Satyajit Ray, who encouraged her to make it into a film. And he recommended Shashi Kapoor as a producer. Now, Shashi Kapoor had already produced Shyam Benegal's Junoon and Kalyug. And this was 1979-80, when she flew over to Bombay, and she talked to Shashi, Jennifer, and Govind Nihalani, who was originally supposed to do the camera, because he'd done the camera for Junoon and Kalyug, and later started off as director, and his first film was actually also produced by Shashi Kapoor. Anyway, that was post 36. Anyway, so there we are, and yes, so it was greenlit immediately. They loved the script, and she came back to Calcutta with her contract. Now, they began shooting in October 1980. As far as I know, in the Durga Puja sequence, the immersion of the Durga goddess was the first sequence to be filmed. And then they started shooting with a close unit, primarily. Polomidi, can you please mute yourself, if you don't mind? Yeah, thank you. So, and then they started shooting the film. So, okay, now we'll go into the plot a little bit. We first meet Miss Violet Stoneham at what we can recognize quite easily as the South Park Street Cemetery, and her Anglo-Indian ancestry is decisively established. She's paying tribute to her deceased kin. We see the gravestones reading Augustus Stoneham and Kalidashi Catherine Stoneham. So we realize it was an English, a reverend clerk in the British East India Company who married an Indian lady. And so this decisively establishes her Anglo-Indian roots. So the film is actually framed very carefully. It starts off in the Park Street Cemetery. It ends in the Victoria Memorial, as we know. It's framed by two Shakespearean texts. It starts with Twelfth Night. It ends with King Lear. It starts on Christmas Eve. It ends on Christmas Eve. So we are seeing exactly the span of 1 year. And it's also punctuated at key moments by Violet's letters from Violet's niece, Rosemary. This is Soni Razdan in her acting debut. And she's Rosemary Peters. She's writing from Perth. And she keeps encouraging her aunt to come and join them there. And she's, the world is closing in on Violet. Her options are, I mean, her beloved brother passes away in the course of the film. Her colleague, her slightly cynical colleague, Wendy McGowan, who's also her close friend, moves to Canada with her son and daughter, albeit with reservations, and as she confides in a letter to Violet later on. But Violet finds the world sort of hemming in on her, but Aparna Sen leaves the ending open. We really don't know whether Violet, she walks away into the night, but we don't know whether she actually relocates to Perth, to her, where her niece is bringing up her son with her fiance, with her husband. So that's an open ending, and I think the film is all the more powerful for it. So there we have. I mean, Aparna Sen quickly establishes the governing arc of the film in a quick succession of scenes. I mean, Violet she goes to the fish market where she shops for herself. She visits her ailing diabetic brother Eddie in an old age home. She goes to school, of course, and she takes walks and she visits her deceased kin and her late fiance who died in the war, David Nathaniel Bedford, in the cemetery. So this is the sort of compass around which her life revolves. Now, just to introduce, before we first meet Nandita and Shamoresh, whose trajectories will collide with Violet's in the film, Violet's memory is jogged by, about Nandita when she meets her at a former student's wedding. And then, of course, when she's coming out of Christmas Day service from St. Paul's Cathedral, she meets them again. She invites them over. And, of course, we know what happens. Shamoresh is, he's a very wily, canny, cynical, very strategic man. And he starts to subtly flirt with Miss Stoneham, and she becomes susceptible very quickly to his blandishments and starts to think that great literature is being produced on her place. He gifts her his first novel, which of course is, if you see the book closely, it's Calcutta If You Must Exile Me by Pritish Nandi, but it's meant to be Shamaresh's first novel, which Nandita tells us had got great reviews, and he tells her that I'm James Joyce in the making, and of course she's a literature person. She completely she gives in to him, and she allows the couple to use her flat for what she thinks is a sort of writing workshop, but actually they're using it as a love nest. Now, what happens is Violet slowly, the couple's lives, and that's where I think the film transcends its immediate local context of an Anglo-Indian lady who is lonely, who is terribly lonely, of course, and that's demonstrated beautifully in the film, without any self-pity or without any, with great resilience and dignity. I think it's portrayed in the film, and it's one of the film's greatest strengths. And at no point do we see Violet sort of bemoaning her lot. But there we are. We slowly find her getting enamored of this young couple, and they make her tea, and they take her to Victoria Memorial. They take her for occasional jaunts at two other places, and she finds her life being slowly overtaken by theirs, to the point where she starts ignoring what were heretofore her top priorities, which were visiting her brother. She actually forgets to visit Eddie, and he is ailing, and soon after he passes away, and she's consumed by guilt when she says it's when he accuses her of, it's only those Indian kids that you look for, and she completely breaks down, and you can see in her eyes that she recognizes what he the kind of indubitable truth in some of his accusations. So the first, I want to play a clip from the film, because I mean it's a visual medium, and there are some startling sequences in the film. So the first clip that I'll play is from the film, where she's actually visited her brother Eddie in the excuse me, in the old age home, and he's sort of drifted off to sleep over his chocolate wafers and the Archie comics she's got for him. And she remembers her niece telling her that she'll end up in that same old age home, and then what happens subsequently. So can I change, sort of share my screen?
Yes,
Is
sure,
that-
you can go ahead. Yeah.
Entire screen, share system audio. Never done this before actually. Share entire screen.
You'll have to click on share with audio.
After you open the file the video to screen, that is when you enable the audio.
Okay, fine,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
I'll try once more. Sorry, I haven't done
Yes.
this before. Yeah. Thank you.
Now. Merry Christmas for tomorrow. There. See, I bought you some chocolate biscuits. And there. You like these nice Archie comics, don't you now? Give. Look, Eddie, there's a card for you from Kenneth. Eddie, I said there was a card for you from Kenneth.
Who's Kenneth?
Oh, Eddie, really now. Kenneth, your son Kenny. He's writing to you from Hong Kong, from his ship, and he wishes you a very...
Kenny? Kenny went away. Kenny ship, you went away.
Yes. Well, he's remembering you now, and he wishes you a very happy...
I went away, Violet.
I don't know, Eddie. They all went away. Kenny, Rosemary. what you're thinking of doing now.
I've accepted Cedric. We're getting married and going away to Australia. He's got a job voucher.
But
But
you never loved him.
I do now.
Oh, my dear. You mustn't marry like this on the rebound, you know. There's no hurry after all.
Isn't there? Cedric's in a hurry. He's got to be in Australia within 6 weeks.
Surely you could follow him later if necessary. Take your time. Think about it. Stay back for a while.
Doing what?
What about that job you applied for? Didn't you go for the interview?
There wasn't any interview. They deeply regretted that they were unable to accommodate me at the moment. And should there be any suitable vacancy in the future, they would kindly remember me. Sincerely yours.
I could speak to Mrs. Ainsley, of course, if there is any opening in the school.
No! You think I want to come back to a lonely old room when I'm 60 years old? You think I want a pile of homework to keep me company in the evenings? You think I want to land up in an old people's home like Uncle Eddie? That's where you'll end up in 10 years' time, make no mistake.
Heaven
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Yes. Okay. Okay. So I wanted to just show this sequence, and it struck me, like I said, that the film is bookended by two Shakespeare texts. It's bookended by two iconic colonial institutions. It's bookended. It starts on Christmas Eve. It ends on Christmas Eve. It's also bookended by Silent Night. I mean, this starts off. It sort of. I mean, it closes the prelude about 20 minutes into the film, where we just see Violet interacting with what we can assume has been her life for several years before we have arrived to the point at which her circumstances change slightly, and then of course goes back. There's a circular arc, and it goes back to uh, presumably where it was, but uh, I mean, it's a more sobered. There's been a profound realization, but it's also this remarkable sequence. What I find very moving is that every time I see the sequence, I think of the people who are left out. There are people who are celebrating, but there are, I mean, there are poor people on the streets who are shivering, who don't have a proper roof over their heads. And when we see Christ the Savior is born, we actually see a beggar shivering on an underpass. So that's a very strong comment, I think, about the people who are left out, who are not incorporated into the mainstream narrative. And that's sort of what the film is doing in a sort of broader trajectory, is symptomatic, is sort of I mean, exemplified in a sort of micro narrative in this small sequence. And even within the film, can we mute Tarakeshwar, please? I'm getting feedback. It's a little distracting. So thank you. So the film is very attentive to diegetic sound. I mean, diegetic sound is, I mean, the kind of ambient noise that you hear. I mean, throughout the film, we can tell the time of the day by the kind of hawkers that were plying on the streets. And this was something that Aparna Sen told me when she was growing up. She spent several lonely afternoons reading in Punditya Place, which was her maternal grandfather's house. And she could actually tell the time of day by noting which hawkers were plying on the roads, and that's something she brings beautifully into her film. So you could actually study the soundscape of the film, and you could write an oral you could construct an oral archive of Calcutta of the time. A Calcutta we have sort of irretrievably lost now. So that was one I wanted to say. And there's a very conscientious archiving impulse at work in the film. We see letters, sort of Violet, she reads them. We don't see her reading them as much as when she's actually going about her chores in the flat. Bits of the letter come wafting back to her, and she pauses, she adds some brandy to her tea to make it stronger, and then she sort of starts rehearsing bits of the letter again. So she actually lives for, and she exists in the space between letters. It's somewhat suggestive. And of course there are photo frames, there are albums which she shares with Nandita. Shamarish is not interested, he's leafing through a magazine, but Nandita feigns some interest. Some of it may be genuine because she finds herself in some of the photos. And we get a very strong sense that the past is coextensive with the present in Violet's imagination, and that is splendidly sort of realized in possibly, I mean, I have many favorite sequences in the film, but the dream sequence, I think it's like something out of Bergman. You can realize that Aparna Sen had, I mean, the fact that she'd grown up with European art house classics is sort of, it doesn't seem like, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but it doesn't seem like anything that we see in the cinema of that time. Of course, this was filmed in Bombay, in Mud Island, and Shashi Kapoor constructed. I mean, he vacated lots of, I mean, very densely populated places just so that she could get the kind of mise-en-scène she wanted. And I think I'll play a bit of the dream sequence now. Just let me. This is sort of after the couple have first visited her, and Shamarish and Nandita, and she remembers David Nathaniel Bedford, and then she's reading at night, and then she has her first dream. I'll just.
That must be you with the buck tooth.
Shut up. I never had buck teeth in my life. I know I have one broken tooth, but you needn't rub that in.
Madam, history will remember you for extending your kind patronage to Shamarish Maitru.
Davy. Davy.
I, Dave Nathaniel, take thee, Violet Amelia, my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward.
From this day forward.
And we commit in sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poorer.
For better, for worse.
For better, for worse.
to love, and to cherish,
sure and certain
till death
hope of the resurrection
do us
to
part.
eternal life through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, you are.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, we go through that dream sequence, which I think is visually one of the high points of the film. You realize how past and present are sort of coterminous for Violet, and you also realize that I mean the wedding vows were being sort of intercut with a funeral service. So how desire and death sort of mesh together. It follows a very classic Freudian scheme. Her dream, the dream sequence entirely. I mean, sort of desire, displacement, wish fulfillment. They're all there. Anyway, it's a splendidly realized sequence, and it's one of the high points of the film. Okay. That being done, and also we must realize in terms of the casting, it was we pretty much see the whole family there. I mean, Jennifer is there, of course. Her father, Jeffrey Kendall, is watching. Shomurish and Nandita from her present intrude on the past of the dream. Karan Kapoor, Jennifer's son, is actually playing her deceased lover in the film. Then you have Sanjana playing her mother's younger self. And of course, Shashi Kapoor was producing the whole thing. So we don't see Laura Liddell, and we don't see Kunal Kapoor, the eldest son, who was the production manager for 36 Chowringhee Lane, but we see pretty much everyone else. Okay, so that being done, so the overriding theme in the film is loneliness, of course, which is brought home to us very powerfully and very poignantly, but it's all the more effective because it's not it's not sort of serviced or channelized through melodrama. It's left to speak for itself, and ultimately we don't get a tale of self-pity. We get a tale of immense resilience. We get a tale of dignity. And Violet actually goes back to the text. She wasn't teaching King Lear, but when she comes back to Shakespeare in the end, she's actually made Shakespeare a living resource to just carry on her life with, and that is one of the most powerful. It actually radially draws in Shakespeare into the lived experience of the play, and that's something very few films have managed to do. I mean, Lear may be a vestigial presence in the film, but Aparna Sen has actually managed to reanimate it and rewrite what is actually in the play. If you go back to the play, Lear is actually quite, he gives into self-pity, he bemoans his lot, but there is none of that in 36. I mean, there is stoicism, and there's resilience, and there's dignity. So she's actually, I mean, despite Lear being a vestigial presence, she's actually reanimating it and rewriting and refashioning it for her purposes, which I think is quite, I mean, it may seem to be achieved by the by, but it's actually one of the most enduring triumphs of the film, and also makes something very local. I mean, the local context being a sort of the film as such being framed as a paean to the disappearing and fast dwindling Anglo-Indian community in late 70s, early 80s Calcutta, into something that is a more universal tale of loneliness, betrayal, rejection, and that actually links it to some of the key plot points in Shakespeare's play. Okay, that being done, of course, I've talked about the Anglo-Indian community. I want to talk a little bit about English language films. Now, 36 Chowringhee Lane was the second English language film to ever win the National Award for Best Feature Film in English. There was one film before this, in 1964, if I remember correctly, which won the award. And then there were 17 years went by without any film being any English films being made in the country that could be legitimately considered for this award. And then, of course, we've had a thin but steady stream of English language films, many helmed by Aparna Sen herself. She's, of course, made Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, 15 Park Avenue, The Japanese Wife, and Sonata. So 4 more films which were not exclusively but predominantly filmed in English. And I mean, one doesn't need subtitles to sort of steer the course. The Avalanche, yes, thank you, Basav. The Avalanche was the first one in 1964, and 36 was the second one. And it also, of course, won the National Award for Best Direction. But Jennifer Kendall famously lost out on the National Award for Best Actress, and it's something that's debated to this day. We know now that Ashok Kumar was head of the jury and Rekha was a staunch favorite of his, and she got the National Award for Best Actor for Ramraojan, a decision she questioned herself. She went up on the podium and said, I don't know how I got this award. I don't know, given that Jennifer was in competition. Jennifer ko hi milna chahiye thi, I think is what she said. But now that I've been given this award, I'm going to accept it. So that I mean, a decision, one of the most famous decisions where, the longevity of 36 as a film, I mean, the fact that it still has legs and is not aged at all in the 4 decades since its making shows that it's possibly the Indian jury was not in sync with what was actually the more invisible performance, perhaps, because she was just behaving, because Ashok Kumar apparently said, I didn't see her performing in the film. I thought she was just behaving, which Jennifer said is the greatest compliment for me. Jennifer didn't get the BAFTA, actually. She was nominated for the BAFTA. The BAFTA went to Katharine Hepburn for On Golden Pond, a film which I saw with my mother, who's also on this Zoom call. And it's a beautiful film. I mean, Katharine Hepburn performed marvelously, but I have a soft corner for Jennifer's performance, especially because she died a few years later and she never really got that chance. I mean, Katharine Hepburn has famously 4 Oscars, one more than Meryl Streep, but Jennifer didn't get her moment in the sun, which was, I think, very unfair because she poured her heart and soul into this movie. It's a lovely film. It would have remained a lovely film, but I don't think it would have been a great film had Jennifer not, animated Violet Stoneham so powerfully. And not once do you see her really performing, within quotes. She actually lives the role. And it's one of the most iconic roles in film history. She got the British Evening Standard Award for Best Actress, which is, West Bengal has an equivalent where the film journalists and the film press come together to laud what they consider the best performances of the year. And Jennifer, of course, traveled to London and she got that award. And she was nominated for the BAFTA, and the only other Indian actress who was nominated for the BAFTA, incidentally, before Jennifer Kendall in 36 Chowringhee Lane, was Karuna Banerjee in Satyajit Ray's second film, Aparajito. She didn't win either, but she was nominated. And these remain in my knowledge. I've gone through the BAFTA nominee lists over the decades, and I don't think anyone other than Karuna Banerjee and Jennifer Kendall have been nominated for productions which have been filmed in Calcutta, both of them, incidentally. So there we are. And okay, so I talked about loneliness. One could say a lot of things about loneliness. The Anglo-Indian community, okay, I wanted to say something about the broader social narrative being braided with the individual narrative here. Many people think many people mischaracterize 36 Chowringhee Lane as just Miss Violet Stoneham's story, whereas of course it is that, and it's not a first person narrative, but the third person omniscient narrator takes a very detached, dispassionate look. Yes, of course, Adarsh Gaurav was nominated last year, but I meant through the 60s, 70s, 80s, they were the only 2 actors. As far as I know, I stand corrected if there were others. I don't know, but I did a little research online and I couldn't find anyone else mentioned. Neither one, of course, but both were nominated in what are peerless films. Of course, Aparajito got the Golden Lion in Venice, which Satyajit Ray personally considered a higher honor than the Oscar, till of course he got the Oscar for Lifetime Achievement and he revised his opinion. But 36 Chowringhee Lane got the Grand Prix, the Golden Eagle at Cine Manila, which was a very prestigious film festival in Philippines, and it was actually the equivalent of the Busan Film Festival today. It was where the best Asian films sort of competed, and it got the top honors there. And interestingly, Aparna Sen has just got just about a couple of months ago, she's got the Grand Prix at Busan for her latest film. So 4 decades later, she's completed that arc. The two major Asian film festivals of that time have nominated her first and her 17th films as the best. Okay, that's just by the by. But 36 Chowringhee Lane, I think, is the best thing she's made by many a million mile. And there are many reasons for that. I mean, not exclusively Jennifer Kendall's performance, but also, the way she handled the photography, the script, which there's not one wasted moment or one wasted line. I mean, a lot of art house films, if we revisit them, and Nasiruddin Shah is famous for decrying the art house films of that time, a little hypocritically, I think, sometimes, but because he clearly enjoyed the fruits of that film, and that made him into the actor he was. He's a fine actor, but I mean, those films with Sham Benegal and Gulzar made him, but he often disses them now, and he says they were slow and boring. Well, some of them did have a lot of flab, one can, I think, fairly say, but 36 is not one of those films. You can't call it experimental, you can't call it mainstream, but it eschews the vices of a lot of self-consciously art house films of the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, which are, of course, the nadir of both commercial and art house cinema. This came in 1981, so just at the beginning of that decade. It's actually carrying the legacy of 1970s films, and represents that decade and contemporary Calcutta of that decade for us on screen. So it's acting as a visual archive also of the city and its sounds, and of course, a disappearing community that is now so seamlessly assimilated into the populace that their specific contours are not distinct anymore. So that was one. And oh yes, when I was talking about the individual narrative of Violet Stoneham being braided with the larger social narrative, in the film you find Rosemary has to move to Perth with her fiance Cedric, I think his name is, because she doesn't get a job. The interview that she appears for appears to be a hoax, and she's told that if there's a vacancy, they'll get in touch with her, and Cedric gets a job voucher and they move to Australia. Similarly, Violet's colleague, Wendy McGowan, played wonderfully by Deena Ardeshir. Her son, Tony, and her daughter-in-law Myra fail to get the customs job they apply for, and it goes to only one Anglo-Indian gets it, and another tribal, a Santhal candidate gets it, and they are forced to look for greener pastures elsewhere because the sort of options are closing in on them. So very subtly, these markers are woven in by Sen that the options were reducing for them, and they found it, viable in more ways than one to look for options outside India. And sometimes, like in the case of Violet, although we don't know where she ends up eventually, perhaps reluctantly. Perhaps some of them didn't want to relocate but were forced to, unless they were very old and ailing and had no one to turn to in their time, which was actually the case with two of Aparna Sen's own teachers, who partially inspired the character of Violet Stoneham that she wrote into the film. So, how am I doing for time?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you could wind up in 5 minutes.
Wind up. Okay, sure. So, one thing that I find very moving in the film, of course, it starts off with Violet Stoneham reading the first few lines of Twelfth Night to her students, and they're bored and indifferent and quite rowdy bunch of schoolgirls who are more interested in love comics and sort of risque love comics in which they see characters kissing and so on, and the antiquated language of Shakespeare has no appeal for them. But the new recruit who comes in, played by Renu Roy, Miss Mazumdar, who has a special degree in English literature classes, which I assume meant a B.Ed, actually makes the girls enact the parts, and that's the clip I'll show. I think everyone is familiar with the last scene, so we won't show the last scene, but instead I think Violet's very powerful, it's a silent moment, of course, like a similar silent moment later when she catches the couple kissing and she realizes what they were using their flat for, and what the sham of writing a novel was just that. There's a there's a sort of the look on Violet Stonham's face is so inscrutable. There's pain, of course, you can see tears brimming in her eyes, but there's also hurt, rejection, but there's also forgiveness. And that, I think, these mixed emotions require very powerful, and it's there in the rasas, it's there in the Indian rasas, it's not alien to our acting or cinematic tradition, but Jennifer brings it out very powerfully. But the one I want to show is where she's actually waiting outside a classroom and she realizes her own obsolescence, and perhaps the obsolescence of a mode of pedagogy that is now extinct. So we'll just look at that clip quickly. 1 second. Yes, I'll just share my screen.
How now, Malvolio?
Sweet lady, ho ho.
Smilest thou? I sent for thee upon a sad occasion.
Sad lady, I could be sad. This does make some obstruction in the blood. This cross-gartering.
Why, how dost thou, man? What's the matter with thee?
Not black in my mind, though yellow in my legs. It did come to his hands, and the command shall be executed. I think we do know the sweet Roman hand. I'm going to read the text next time.
Good afternoon, girls. Take out your grammar notebooks, please. Last week, we finished adjectives. This week we'll start with adverbs. I'm afraid grammar is not a very interesting subject, but it has to be learnt in order to master the language properly. Now, take this down. Question. What is an adverb? Answer. An adverb is a word which qualifies a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. For example, the bird winged swiftly across.
Don't talk like that, dearie. Don't talk like that. You're my brother, Eddie. I love you more than anybody else in the whole world. You're all I've got. I'll get you your biscuits if you want them so much.
Promise?
Promise.
Tomorrow?
Yes, tomorrow. Only don't talk like that, my dear. Don't ever talk like that again.
So the camera just stays on Miss Stonham's face for a good minute, actually, if you notice. And in Renaissance drama, we keep talking about recognition scenes. I think this is 36 Chowringhee Lane's answer to the Renaissance recognition scene. And it's a prelude to the recognition scene later in the film when she realizes she's been betrayed. I mean, I wish I could play that sequence. It's a long sequence. We all know it. We love it. I mean, it's powerful. It just gets me in the jugular every time I see it, because I'm like, she knew, I mean, Jennifer, the actress, knew that she was going to see the party play out before her, and but every time that look on her eyes, and I just concentrated on two lesser moments which are frequently overlooked: when she realizes that her students, her beloved students, don't miss her, and when she realizes she's been cheated by the couple, which is a prelude to the recognition scene right at the end of the film. Yeah, I mean, she realizes that she's been betrayed, she's been rejected, and but life moves on. I mean, there is resilience and there is stoicism, and when finally she's walking with that cake and the dog is following the scent of the cake sort of behind her, she realizes that she cannot crumble, and there is resilience, there's fortitude, there's dignity, and she takes strength from what she considers life's most ineluctable sort of asset, which is Shakespeare for her, and she that draws it radially into the ambit of the film, and it's a powerful performance, and it's an unforgettable film, and I can't have enough of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Subhankar, for your extremely lucid presentation. You have opened up the film at several levels, and it is now open for discussion. Anyone who would like to, you have a question or you have a comment?
Bhashwati, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to comment on the music of the film, because Vanraj Bhatia's music, I felt, amplified the loneliness theme a lot more. So.
Vanraj Bhatia, we lost him recently. Thank you, Bhashwati. That's a lovely question, and I should have talked about it in some detail. We lost Vanraj Bhatia recently. He was 93, and he's done some remarkable work for the film. He's actually worked on Shyam Benegal's Junoon and Kalyug before this. So Aparna was working with Shashi Kapoor's unit. I mean, Govind Nihalani didn't do the camera, but Vanraj Bhatia, Bhanudas Divakar, Hitendra Ghosh, they were all part of Shashi Kapoor's unit, and so most of them were retained. She wanted Govind Nihalani, of course, but he was the second unit AD for Richard Attenborough's Gandhi, so he couldn't come in for the film. And Ashok Mehta did the work, and she saw him in a film. Anyway, that's besides the point. You were asking about Vanraj Bhatia, and yes, I mean, there's a signature tune in the film, which, emerges at certain critical points. I mean, when in the beginning, when we see her jouncing on that rickshaw, slowly dozing off when she's on her way home, we hear that track. That track follows her as she works her way up the stairs to her flat. And then, of course, we hear the radio and so on. And we can hear the radio. Actually, the ambient sound is so clear in the film. You can actually hear Asha Bhosle's, you can hear the voice of the radio commentator sing Asha Bhosle's song with lyrics by Mehdi Ali Khan and tune by Madan Mohan. And it's very clear that the radio, and she sometimes changes the radio channels as when she gets tired of a certain song being played. And then the signature track again re-emerges when the couple have abandoned her and moved on, and then it re-emerges right at the end. So it's actually underlining the loneliness theme musically. It's creating a musical narrative counterpoint to the film, and it does that beautifully. And of course, there are other songs like Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny, Yellow Polka Dot Bikini, which of course are Rosemary's gramophone record, which they discover in the film, and that's played, and that is brilliantly used in a montage sequence to establish how life goes on for Violet, when basically there's a routine succession of scenes to show that this is more of the same. And then a break, a departure in the narrative is marked by moving away from sound. So there's a very interesting play with sound, BGM, ambient noise, ambient sound in the film. So very attentive, and especially I think the sound of the hawkers to indicate the different time of day. So the sound by Hitendra Ghosh and the music by Vanraj Bhatia, I think are very percipient and alert and quite remarkable for its time, actually. And it's something that took me a few viewings to get used to. I mean, the kind of things that were being indicated, like if you notice the dust, the boy who comes to collect the scraps of paper, etc., in the morning, and that is when she sort of ushers him out and hands Nandita the key. So little incidental details like this, or when she pulls at her collar when she's a little conscious, so of being seen in her sort of nightgown when the couple give her a visit at night. So sort of small incidental details like this, how her study table and the photos on it keep changing to indicate different times in the year. Initially you have her fiance and you have 2 photos of her niece, then you have the niece and their how do you like our new car, the photo that comes in and she's wondering where to keep it, and then in the end you find that picture with Shomoresh and Nandita and their the wedding photo when she actually gets the letter from Wendy McGowan from Canada saying that she's not very happy there and she feels she's not wanted. So different times of the day being indicated, different times of the year being indicated through mise-en-scène, through sound. So very alert use of diegetic sound and BGM. Yes, I mean, remarkable for its time and particularly remarkable for a first film. Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Shubhankar. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Subhankar. Yeah, you mentioned yellow polka dot bikini. That reminds me about objects in the film, you know, which I thought were placed and used very beautifully. For instance, Shomoresh seems to hanker after some of the objects of Stonham's era, you know, especially the gramophone, the records. He's even familiar with the songs such as Lipstick on Your Collar, and as you just mentioned, Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. And the irony in it is, while he hankers after these objects, the person from that era is for him someone who is to be used so long as required and then just simply cast aside. So I thought that was an interesting.
That's very perceptive. That's very interesting, because the first time that Shomoresh and Nandita come into the flat, she says nothing seems to have changed here. That's what she says. That's what she tells Miss Stoneham, and Shomoresh is constantly looking at the framed paintings, and he's looking at the horn, the gramophone, and for him they are sort of what we call empty signifiers. They are. I mean, he can think of a more apposite place for them, which is in his own home, where he'll sort of when we see there's that little incidental detail at the end in the party where Mukul Sharma, who was actually married to Aparna Sen, who's Konkona Sen Sharma's father, he plays the party guest, and he asks Dhritiman Chatterjee, Shomoresh, where did you get this from? And he says it's a Tauren, it's the 45th piece ever manufactured. We don't even know whether he got that information from Miss Stoneham, but he passes it on as sort of something. And Mukul Sharma asks him that, where did you get this from? And he says, you've got to be on the lookout for this, old chap. And this is obviously something that Miss Stoneham can hear because she's standing outside the door, and it's something that the casual cruelty that's brought out by this. I mean, this indifference when she had actually not only gifted the gramophone as a wedding present, but also brought the gramophone records later to them. And so this complete erasure of Miss Stoneham from their life is brought out in this very casual throwaway remark. And I think it's all the more powerful because it shows how people are capable of unthinking acts of violence and erasure when it comes to and dressing up things to suit their purposes. And the gramophone, of course, it figures at key moments. I mean, Nandita strokes it when she asks Miss Stoneham to lend them the flat so that Shomoresh could write. Shomoresh strokes it when he's drunk, when he asks for it as a wedding present. And I also feel it's an inter-film nod to Aparna Sen's first film, Mrinmoyi, where she was playing Mrinmoyi, where there's a gramophone there as well. She hides her jewelry in it the night she runs away. So I somehow feel, I mean, she doesn't acknowledge it. I've asked her about it. She says it wasn't conscious, but I feel it's a nice little nod to to her first acting venture, where the gramophone played, I mean, it was a very important object. And of course, that kind of archiving that was being done in the film through objects is testimony. I mean, the color of the photos, the sepia frames of the photos, the kind of pens that were being used, the photo frames, the albums, the objects, the paintings, the music. I mean, the very gramophone records and the music, they allowed to take us back to an earlier time, which I see as symptomatic of the archiving impulse at work consciously from the beginning to the end, through institutions, through objects, through memories, through documents, and through sound.
Yeah, thank you so much. Would anyone else like? Yes, Nikhila, please go ahead.
Thanks, Subhankar, for a very interesting film, for suggesting the film. As well as for this, many issues that you have laid out in the course of your presentation. You have made this point, but I want to kind of, offer my own take and elaborate on this a little. That is about the growing irrelevance. I mean, the way the film maps out the growing irrelevance of the Anglo-Indian community. So in a sense, it is post-colonial with a hyphen. I mean, more as a descriptor after colonialism approaching, what happened to this community. I mean, everything from professionally to the climactic sequence where she is outside and peering in, almost like Heathcliff and Catherine are looking on to the Earnshaw, to the the world of the civilized, so to speak. So it almost reminded me of how this film constructs irrelevance, or the growing irrelevance at one level, but without the edge of post-colonial critique. Post-colonial without a hyphen. So there is no critique of the particular kind of modernity, or there is no attempt at, for instance, the Indian principle. I mean, it isn't as if she's seen as someone adequate, or in a way, seen in a better light than her predecessors. And the way in which Wendy and the conversation among the teachers show that they're aware that their time is well past. But the interesting part for me of the film was the grace with which the central character reconciles with her growing irrelevance. That to me was a major takeaway from the film. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, all I can say to that, I completely agree with everything. I mean, there is an affection for the past way of life that is seen as antiquated and perhaps of limited or no interest. I mean, it's there in the bored and indifferent schoolgirls who have no patience for Shakespeare, but who completely revise their opinion when they're asked to act it out. So a sort of awareness with an old mode of pedagogy, a kind of music that most people are not listening to, books that they're not reading now. We can't see the book that Miss Stoneham is reading, but I think it was Treasure Island, and the kind of poetry, the kind of music. So through literature, through sound, through institutions, a sort of history of a community that is now, I mean, these markers remain, but the sort of the vibrant life of that community that once defined Calcutta has completely been, largely, not largely, but almost exclusively erased from the Calcutta we inhabit now. So there is, of course, all these markers, and when you mentioned the South Indian principle, Miss Swaminathan, I remember Wendy complaining that we had real English ladies in our time, and proper English ladies too. So there is an affection, there is a nostalgia for the past, but that doesn't mean that the present is being not objectively sort of made peace or sort of coming to terms with. And of course, another thing that I enjoy about the film is suffused with literary references. Of course, there's James Joyce. Miss Mazumdar says Big Brother's watching you, which is of course George Orwell, and there are the Shakespeare quotes, of course. So a kind of I mean, there is cultural deracination, some would say. There is Anglophilia, there is elitism. Belatedly, one could sort of indict the film on these charges, but it's actually a look at the city from a prism that we were not used to at all. We had Shrutajit Ray's Mohanagar, which had an Anglo-Indian character, but of course, and that she acts as a sort of agent provocateur to catalyze the protagonist, that is Madhavi Mukherjee's change of heart in the film. But here we are looking at the entire film from Miss Violet Stonham's prism, and that is, I think, it remains exceptional for its time, and even the films that have followed, the few films that have followed in its wake, have not been able to match it for sheer narrative power and grace. Yeah.
Anyone else with a comment or a question?
I hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Subhankar?
I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to just add.
Yeah, Basa, please go ahead.
Yeah. So one is, I really think the mise en scène, the way it is set up in the photography, especially around the central character in the film. Whenever she walks in the corridor, it's empty. When she's going in the the
church,
the rickshaw or the pulled rickshaw, that is, the streets are empty. Almost her own loneliness is reflected in the emptiness in the streets, and even the building she lives in, the decadence is also a reflection, decadence of the building. The lift doesn't work many times, and the doors and the windows and everything is old. So I think that is a very interesting. I felt because the city is almost the bustling city is almost like out of her reach. In a way, the only two times we see there is a barrier, like I think there's a protest march going on, but there is a compound in between her and the protest march at one point. And then, of course, in the last scene where, she's peering through a glass barrier into this whole social gathering. So as if this new society is sort of almost like alien to her, and that is reflected in this photography and the mise en scène that is set up. That I found very interesting, and of course I think it is the nostalgia is a little bit like Nicola ma'am mentioned. It sort of borders on it lacks the post-colonial critique that I don't know if it is fair to expect it or not, but it does have that tinge of the nostalgia for the life gone by, or life fading away rather. So that, these are the two things I really, and of course, I think what is interesting is also this alienation that we see of the old woman is pretty much, it's also a phenomenon now we see a lot in urban areas, with many with no children, or many with children living abroad, living by themselves in flats in cities, and during COVID we have seen the Bombay film critic Rashid Irani, in fact, had written a very nice article during COVID time because he lived alone all his life, and he never had even kitchen in his home, and suddenly there was lockdown, and how he was 80-something man living alone, and also struggling to get even a cup of tea outside, right? So I think it's sort of is a reflection again. I think we are in that not necessarily in of course it's the specific community that she talks about, but the film depicts rather, but I think that urban alienation for old people is again sort of a very valid subject today, and
very contemporary.
Very contemporary. 20 years back, probably when I watched, I didn't feel it, but now again I feel like this is a very valid
added resonance.
Today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, yeah, thank you. That was amazing. That was very insightful. And I don't have anything to add to that, but I just feel that the loneliness and her isolation are sort of brought out. The fact that you made about relating that to the mise-en-scène is actually very keenly observed, because the bustling metropolis is somehow at a distance from her. I mean, she is not implicated in them directly. Either she's on a rickshaw observing, or through a glass, not very darkly, to paraphrase Bergman, and or she's just looking out of the window of her flat, or she's interacting. There is always a prism or a medium through which she's interacting with them, and it's the individual and the environment pitted against each other, but not in a confrontational way, but just to show how the odds are stacked against this one lady, and the society, the circumstances, the opportunities that were available to her and that defined her life slowly start closing down, but she refuses to cave in, and like she starts framing the letter to Rosemary in the last scene, that I was hesitant to leave the country of my birth, but now I'm sorely tempted to. Yes.
Shaumik Chakraborty has raised his hand.
Yes.
I was just in relation to the idea of material cultures, that are there in the film. I was thinking about the title 36 Chowringhee Lane, and so I was thinking about these sort of locales that is central. The locale of 36 Chowringhee Lane, also the spaces of the material cultures of Calcutta, which is central to the film. And I was also thinking about other films like by like the 15 Park Avenue, right? Or say the Goinar Bagh show. So these films also talk about a particular place or a particular sort of object, right? A particular material culture. So I was thinking about, I wanted Professor's comment on whether he thinks that it is a part of her stylistics to actually sort of, go back to that kind of, nostalgia that we were talking about vis-a-vis material cultures in her work.
Thank you, Shaumik. Was that a question for me, or?
Yeah, I wanted your insights, like whether you think it is
yes.
Aparna Sen's sort of it's a part of a stylistics to actually sort of revisit these locales.
Yeah, thank you. I like I said, I mean, there is a conscientious archiving impulse at work right through the movie, and that is being done through material history of objects and the pictures, the photo frames, the photo albums, the gramophone, even the kind of writing paper that Miss Stoneham uses, or the chins, the cushions, everything is sort of meant to harken back to a time that we have lost. And actually these were sourced by Aparna Sen and her assistant Amitabh Chatterjee Chaudhuri, I think Chatterjee or Chaudhuri, Amitabh, her chief assistant director, from actual homes of Anglo-Indians who just traded them, were happy to lend them to the film for the purposes of the film for gratis. So there is a very authentic, lived in and inhabited environment in the film where at no point do you feel shortchanged. This is a very, the material density of the film's lived-in atmosphere contributes immeasurably to its richness and the authenticity of its experiential register, definitely. And as per her latest films, Aparna Sen has always had a very keen eye for detail, and she's not done any period films really. I mean, Shoti was set in 19th century Bengal, but she told me that she feels she failed the film and she wasn't happy with the way it turned out. So, I mean, Iti Mrinalini and Goinar Baksho had sort of extended section set in the 70s, but the 70s is something that Aparna Sen has lived through. She was in her 30s then, so we can't really call it period in the sense of the 19th century. And even when she did Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet in Ashinagar, or when she did Tagore, Ghore Baire in Ghore Baire Aaj, she actually set them in the contemporary period. I think this has a lot to do with the fact that she feels with the limited budgets also that she has to contend with as she primarily works in Bengal. It's only recently that she's moved out and started filming in Delhi and other places. But she works with producers mainly from Bengal. It's usually Sri Venkatesh Films that she collaborates with, and the budgets that she gets would not make a sort of ambitious period template, sort of realizing that in exquisite detail, very feasible. So I'm sure that's one impulse, and the other would be that she feels Shoti did not quite pan out as she had wanted to, although I think there are many interesting things going on in the film and sort of visual references to Ray's films and so on. But she wasn't happy with the film, which is why she hasn't gone back to making a film set in a period which she would only have to recover textually, as it were. But when she's gone back in time, she's gone back to a time when she's actually inhabited the 70s and the 80s. And so that's, that would be period for us now in terms of the temporal register of the film, but it's actually not period as far as the lived experience of the director is concerned. But yes, she's always had a very keen eye for detail. I think that's something she learned from Satyajit Ray and from her father Chidananda Das Gupta, and the weathering that she does to the writing table, to the cushions. You can see traces of ink where she's actually blotted the ink of the fountain pen before she started to write, and real minute details like this which will escape most viewers, I think. And it took me, I think, 15 viewings to come to grips with the numerous things she's done by the by, and it just makes for it immeasurably enriches one's viewing experience. And that's what I have to say.
Anyone else would like to step in at this point with a question or a comment? Yes.
Yeah, I would like to say
yes,
something.
Rajan, go ahead.
I find it very interesting that we have two animals, the cat, Tommy Belch, and the dog at the end, almost like what Tom of Bedlam, right? But we also, Lear is talking about a dog's obeyed in office, right? Yeah, so I think that's sums up a lot of what's going on. And I think also it's very important that the Anglo-Indian community is looked down upon, right? Which perhaps has not come across in this film, right? But in reality, they're actually looked down upon. And politically, the 2 seats reserved for Anglo-Indians are going to be done away soon, or they've already been done away with, right? That's in Parliament. So I think politically also this is quite significant. And of course, the question of Silent Night, there's a person who I'm working on, that's Cyril de Brule, who had this play called Eschaton in the 60s. That's the first time in Calcutta that he put it up. And he has a parody of Silent Night, right? For which, when he showed it in Bombay, there were tomatoes thrown at the actors, etc., right? I think that's very significant, because he actually first put it up before his plays are not yet published, right? But that's when he put them up, and the parody of Silent Night actually is hitting the Christian community itself, right? Because he says, Christ the Savior is born and a poor slum is born, right? And when Christians dine of their dainties and sweets, a poor babe, of course he does it in Pune, right? But maybe when he did it in Calcutta, he would say, Calcutta streets, right? Yeah. So that whole parody element, when I first saw it, I was reminded of his play. I saw this play in 75 or 76. 79 it was put up again, and I think it was in 92 it was put up again, right? But it's this kind of Brechtian experimental theater, right? Which keeps it was put up again and again. Yeah. So it changes with the context and the political scenes, etc. Right, but I definitely know that it was in the 60s, late 60s, that he put it up before he came to Pune, right? So I think that was very significant, and this whole idea of the 2 animals, right? And the Mary Poppins bit of it all, which was when she gets up and Mary Poppins says something about perfect people, never
practically perfect in every way.
Yeah, they never
practically perfect in every way. Yeah.
They never given to sentiment or muddled in sentiment or something. I don't remember the exact words, yeah, but I remember that Mary Poppins bit. And so when she gets up with the cake and gets going, right, it looks like, well, I'm a perfectly practical person. I don't want to talk about gratitude and respect and sentiment and any of those things. Right? So I think that's a kind of a positive note, though it's also very dark in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajan. Yeah, the point about the animals is very well taken. Toby Belch is, of course, like Miss Stoneham says, the monkeys got together and named him after the play. And so that's another 12th Night reference. And it's interesting that you see the dog as Tom O'Bedlam. The dog could also be the fool who faithfully follows Lear around. But I think there's that interesting moment of collapse where Miss Stoneham becomes Lear and the fool. It's one of the theories I have about the film. But she constantly calls Shomarish the fool. She says, this young man of yours should be in the circus, and what a clown you've got, and so on. But she ultimately realizes in a sort of darkly ironical moment when we hear Shomarish's voice on playback at the very end. It plays before her dream, and then again in Victoria Memorial when she's looking out and remembering the scene where she was traipsing around and having fuchkas, etc. with them, but forgot to visit her brother Eddie, and she realizes that she had got carried away with this, and but she realizes the joke wasn't her. So she is both Lear and the fool in that sense. I mean, there could be a separate session where we just talk about the last scene. I mean, it's fantastic. And actually the choice of King Lear came from Mukul Sharma, who played the party guest. He suggested, I mean, Aparna Sen told me that she had decided that Miss Stoneham would recite from Shakespeare at the end of the film, but she hadn't zeroed in on the play that Miss Stoneham would recite from. And then Mukul Sharma came to her and said, why not Lear? Why not the recognition scene? And I find that mapping of the film actually has two recognition scenes. Like I showed you the less famous one, and the more famous one is, of course, the one at the end. So yes, thank you for paying attention to the two animals who are faithful consorts to Violet Stoneham. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Rajan. Any other comments?
Yeah, I would just like to say one thing.
Yeah, please.
The door opening and all the leaves there when almost towards the end of the film, right, when she's going to the apartment, and that's again a hit back onto Gone with the Wind, right? Yeah, it's as if everything is gone, right? That's a little bit of something that I thought about when I was watching it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I've also felt that there was shades in the dream sequence of Miss Havisham when you see Miss Havisham from Great Expectations, because I know Aparna Sen is a very careful reader of Dickens, and when you actually see her repeating the wedding vows after David Nathaniel Bedford, after Davy, you actually see her in that in the tiara and the veil, and it's like she's actually not cast off that wedding attire. So there are very strong, I feel, Dickensian echoes there.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Ajanta. Yes, Ajanta.
Yes, so first of all, thanks for this great choice of film. And of course, like all of us, I've really loved it. My discomfort or kind of, I'm somewhat troubled though by the, but of course, Aparna Sen is one of the great auteur directors of parallel cinema. But there were several references made through the presentation around melodrama, popular film, and Aparna Sen's actually made these comments herself. Now, of course, for the last 30 or 40 years, we've seen how powerful melodrama is as a mode. And I was thinking, for instance, of Vishal Bhardwaj's adaptations of Shakespeare, right? So the very idiom of art cinema, I think, has some limitations. We know, of course, now, and I'm just sort of, for instance, the 50s film of MGR, right? They are not seen as melodramatic in Tamil. And we have, of course, a whole formulation of the different idioms of cinema, the different kinds of visual cultures. So, for instance, for Ashish Aditharsh in his latest formulation, and to a large extent, I agree with that, the point of cinema as a technology is not to tell a story at all. And it is the era of Bollywoodization, where cinema is actually replayed through sequel technologies, that is making, kind of things very, very obvious. The fact that we can now go back and watch these films and put these details that were actually already embedded. So I think, well, of course, she's a great auteur director, and but a text has to be located in the tradition from which it comes, and in the kind of space that we inhabit today, with the rise of populist politics, the force of melodrama as an idiom that we need to study, especially kind of in the world that's playing out around us, I think is it has a kind of political urgency that in some ways the art cinema idiom simply is unable to address. So while I agree that some films, the whole sort of assumption that something is realistic, right? Or that it is the lived experience and how, there is this blotting paper. So I am suggesting that there's actually a whole body of theory for at least the last 30 or 40 years that would would question all of these, the idea of narrative form, the idea of the mise en scène, and that could read this film in very, very many ways. I think because we are schooled in a particular way, the film appears to us very, very powerful. But what we are seeing as we see the world play out around us is that in some ways, democracy, and again, all of you know the theories very well, especially democracies in the post-colonial world, teach us that the visual archives, and especially the visual archives of popular cinema, narrative forms, and precisely the kind of melodramatic narratives that in some ways were implied as inferior, actually in some ways are central to the very ways in which the nation has been imagined. So in that sense, it's actually the art cinema that has very, very, I would say, very force or very powerful limitations. So yes, of course, we admire Aparna Sen, and I think she's had very interesting sort of formal innovations. There's one film, I don't remember it, it's completely in the form of a musical, right? So those experimenting, absolutely. It was on
so, Romeo and Juliet. Yes.
So there are, and in Bengal, so these experimentations with form. But what I'm suggesting is that we place a film within the kind of tradition it emerges from, so that the other traditions, one, are neither dismissed as irrelevant, nor kind of in some ways seen as inferior, and critically the whole archive of popular cinemas, regional cinemas, especially of the South, which do not, there is of course an art cinema in the South as well. But so we know cine politics, so there are so many terms. But when you look at Aparna Sen as in some ways, this kind of genius auteur director, I feel that entire way of critically analyzing a film in some ways, gets cast over by her genius. She's undoubtedly very, very important. But I don't think, so to me, the idea of the genius is in any ways, somewhat problematic. And I think we need to unpack that when it comes to somebody like Aparna Sen too, given everything she's achieved. Yeah.
Thank you. That was very relevant. I was actually not, I was just quoting her when I said that she wasn't happy acting in the kind of film she was acting in, because I'm a film history buff. That's my mojo, and I completely, the older the film, the better it is, and I'm completely genre agnostic, if I may term it that way. I've feasted on commercial popular cinemas, and if it's intelligently packaged, directors like Sriram Raghavan working in Bombay now, Zoya Akhtar, Vishal Bhardwaj have shown us that the sort of outer encasing, or what we call the genre of a film, or the mode in which it is sort of presented to an audience, can actually, and if it's made more accessible, quote unquote, and in the populist mainstream, it can actually still remain a powerful device of critique and negotiation. So definitely, and when Aparna Sen actually tried to bring in elements of the populist idiom when she went back to Shakespeare 30 years after 36 Chowringhee Lane with Ashrinogar, and she tried to style it as a musical, she cast a then big mainstream star who's not a very good actor. The film actually bombed. It bombed critically and commercially, and she realized she'd become a prisoner of her own image. She actually said this in an NDTV interview, that whenever people come to see my films, they expect a certain pace, a leisurely pace. It will be about relationship dynamics. It will have very intelligent, perceptive, cerebral dialogue. It will have ace actors like Shabana Azmi and Dhritimani Chatterjee and Konkona, my daughter. So she realized she'd become the reputation that she had so assiduously crafted for herself over the 3 decades of directorial work had actually worked to her undoing when she was trying to break away from that very radically. And I think Ashrinagar is a very powerful film. We can have a discussion on that at some point, because I've studied it in great detail. I'm writing on it now. So it's actually unfairly dismissed. There are many intelligent sort of things going on with it. And I think Aparna Sen is, like Nasiruddin Shah, a little unfair to her. Her immense success as a mainstream heroine actually enabled her and her, her lineage and her connections to the film world, to Ray and so on, opened up the doors to getting a celebrity star producer for her first film. So, I mean, if this was made by just any other first-time director, 36 would not have reached out to as many people as it did even in its own time. It may have been posthumously rediscovered later, but the fact that she was a star in her own right lent her, a certain credence and validity, and made a lot of people were automatically interested in what Aparna Sen, the actress, would come up with in her first directorial venture. I mean, a lot of it is to do with lineage, but also a lot of it has to do with her saleability as a mainstream heroine, who was extremely successful for 3 decades as a leading lady in Calcutta and briefly in Bombay. So she has been unfair to, and Vishal Bhardwaj has cast, of course, Aparna Sen's daughter in his productions, like Omkara, which is Othello, and an adaptation where Konkona played Amelia stand-in, and that is actually where she met Abhishek Chaubey and Hanit Rehan, who produced her first film, A Death in the Ganj, which is, incidentally, again is on Anglo-Indians in McCluskey Ganj. So there are various ways in which the art house, the commercial, the left of mainstream are in dialogue and interacting with each other constantly. And the lines are far more blurred today. And I think we do ourselves disservice if we insist that the art house and the commercial are now hermetically sort of sealed, 2 separate boxes. There's one feeds the other in very rich, productive ways. And what we understood as the art house of the 70s and 80s, the art house of Shyam Benegal and Aparna Sen, is now exemplified by directors like Anurag Kashyap, Vishal Bhardwaj, Dibakar Banerjee, Sriram Raghavan, Zoya Akhtar, who would identify very staunchly as mainstream. But their influences, if you look at Dibakar, it's Shekhar Kapoor. If you look at Zoya, she started off with Meera Nair. Sanjay Leela Bhansali, who is resolutely in the mainstream, loves 36 Chowringhee Lane. He keeps talking about it. He says, look at Sholay, it's a very powerful film, but 36 is made on 1/10 of its budget, and it speaks to us so powerfully. Vishal Bhardwaj loves the film. So a lot of people who work identifiably in the mainstream are actually fans of the film. So something I couldn't touch upon in the course of my I have so many thoughts on the film is its legacy, and the legacy is not restricted just to English language art house films. There's a lot that's going on in the Hindi mainstream space, which has taken from 36 and repeated some of its, not repeated, but retraced some of its trajectory, but also explored new directions and new dimensions to very productive ends. Yes.
Thank you. Any more questions? Comments? Sanjay, you have anything to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, most of the things have already been said. Yeah, hi, Geeta.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a couple of comments.
Yeah,
most of the things are already said. So I was just thinking about aging and all the 3 aspects like biological, psychological, and social. They are already presented in the film. Just a couple of scenes, like the telephone scene, the first time when this Somresh and then Nandita, they are at home at Violet's place. Then she gets a phone call. And then when she goes down, then somebody has invited her. I think Wendy, her colleague, has invited her on Christmas. And she doesn't accept that invitation because she is saying that she has guests at home. And then, if you compare this scene with another telephone scene, then when they have not even, Nandita and Somaresh, they have not even given her telephone number. They want to maintain a distance from her. And probably that's why they have not given their phone number. And she has, and that's why Nandita is asking, where did you get my phone number? And so she had got it from her mother's. Then, and they are making excuses that, and Somaresh is saying that, you get rid of Mrs. Tonham, you make some excuse, and they don't want to invite her. So it is just like the contrast. The first telephone
There's
scene and
another.
this
There's another phone call. Sorry to interrupt. Where news from the old age home comes about her brother's death.
Yes. So that's the in between the second one also. So when she receives the death of the news of death of her brother, and there is one example of dramatic irony when the audience already knows that she's going to, like, she's preparing cake even in the dark when there is power cut, and she's taking that much pain to prepare the cake, but finally they have lied and they have not invited her, and actually they are holding party at their place. So what will happen when she carries that cake and goes to their place? So it's like the audience is aware. We can imagine in a certain way that what is going to happen. Still, so we see this scene, and finally we realize that how she has been abandoned by this couple, because this fellow Somaresh is like a real social climber. So once he climbs the ladder, social ladder, then he doesn't care of the ladder. He drops that ladder and he moves on further. And the King Lear, the last one is like from second act and seventh scene is again like, as you have already said, that we can compare her with and according to your analysis also with the Fool, but particularly with the King Lear, because in literature is the example of how an old man who sacrifices everything for her daughters, and finally he has been left out, abandoned by her daughters. This is something which has been used several times by different writers. Like one of the most important in French literature is The Old Goriot, the novel by Balzac, where again the old Goriot, he sacrifices everything for his two daughters, and finally he is abandoned. So it's like that's a very moving scene, and it's very relevant, and through the literary text it comments on the situation of Violet. So, and also just one point about like the class difference, how it has been shown in the film. Then when she's buying fish, and there is a contrast, the other customer, that these two ladies were standing there, they are paying like around 82 rupees, and then she asks the price of the fish, this lobster, and she's told it is 30 rupees, and so she wants to buy cheaper. That's why she's asking for another variety of this one, prawns, and then she
asked for a smaller size. Yeah, she asked for a smaller size.
Yeah, smaller size. And we can know by the expression of her face also that, you know, she cannot pay that much, and so that costs like 10 rupees. And again, most of the scenes she's like moving on rickshaw, whereas this couple, this Somaresh, he has been, you know, like moving in taxi even when he's unemployed because his
girlfriend, his girlfriend is paying the bill. Yeah,
Nandita. Because we have seen in one film which is very like particular. I mean, it is shown so carefully. Like Somaresh, he comes out of taxi and he goes directly to the building, whereas Nandita is paying the fare.
Yes. When they come with the typewriter. Yeah.
So it's very clear that, you know, he doesn't.
He's like, fleecing her. Yeah. Yes. And also the house that they move in, she asks, is it company quarters? And she says, no, it was a present from my father. So and she says, "Oh, it's good. It's you're lucky that you're an only daughter." And of course, I mean, Shomarish stands to gain in every which way from this liaison, basically, much more than Nandita does.
And this contrast between these two places are also shown, like the bathroom scene, like when you have, you can see how old and in dilapidated condition the toilets are there, and then obviously the flat, the building of this person, Somaresh and Nandita. So every scene is like so carefully like put in
crafted.
This, crafted.
Yes.
So that you can see the contrast, like whatever the director wanted to show. So that was, thank you very much for suggesting us this film.
Thank you. Thank you. Very valuable comments. I just remembered that, when you actually see Shomarish and Nandita's house, you see Jamini Roy paintings, you see, you find bits of Rabindra Sangit wafting in, I think, Ekila Bonne Punno Prane was playing when Nandita turns her neck when the phone rings. So you find an upper middle class, genteel Bengali surrounding, and in the middle of it all, when the camera is panning across and Miss Stoneham is observing the sort of carefully sort of crafted upholstery and the chintz cushions and so on, her eyes finally come to rest on the gramophone, which is, of course, asynchronous with its surroundings, but that is the way Shomarish wanted it. He wanted to sort of boast of it as a sort of prized asset. And of course, he plays music on it also, but for him, it's a curio that's emptied of its it's historical, it's material, it's locally contextual specificities, and that is a kind of violence that is inflicted. Of course, we study object histories, object ontologies. It's a kind of violence he inflicts on it also, however insidiously. So that's there as well. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Sanjay, and thank you, Subhankar, for your response. Any more questions, comments?
Ma, do you want to say something? My mother is on this call.
Yeah, Kakoli Bhattacharya.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, Kakoli, if you wish to say something.
Hello.
Yes,
please go ahead. You're audible.
Yes, I wanted to say I enjoyed the whole experience of listening to my son, and all the discussion was also very enlightening. It was like, I had seen the movie before, but there were so many points which I had not particularly noted, but it was brought out in the discussion. So it was a very interesting experience. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything? You've watched the film very carefully. So was there anything I missed that you want to add? Miss Stoneham at home. Miss Stoneham at home. You were saying. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you for that, Kakuli.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that my mother actually mentioned in a private conversation, which I was hoping she'd bring up, was that the world of Miss Stoneham that's actually built in the flat, the letters that she's reading, or the milk she's heating up for Sir Toby. I mean, this solitary existence, but also one that's lived with great fortitude and with great dignity and without lapsing into self-pity. As I said, she doesn't consciously invite. She of course invites the couple over for Christmas, but she's not looking to be pitied or looking to be she's not looking for charity, even emotional charity of any kind. She's I think her resilience, and that makes it a stronger film than many other films where there is a sort of capitulation in the end, moral, spiritual, whatever. But here there is great resilience and dignity, and the fact that life can be lived on one's own terms and alone and still be meaningful and rich and substantial.
That I think more or less sums up the film as well as the discussion that we have had. So if there are no more comments, Tarkeshwar, please go ahead.
Yeah, if it's not too late.
No, please go ahead.
I was wondering about this oscillating between the individual and the collective while interpreting the narrative in the film. We are looking at it as a kind of a narration about the Anglo-Indian community, what happens to it in the post-independent era. While the other community which is present there, which is in dialectic with this particular single lady, we are not seeing that as a community. We are only seeing them as individuals. If we turn the table and turn our eyes towards, the gaze towards this community, can it be seen as a kind of a comment on the post-colonial Bhadralok, rather than seeing it as a comment on the Anglo-Indian community in a post-independent era? Can we see it as a kind of comment on the post-colonial Bhadralok? Is what I was wondering, because there's enough material to say that. And also another important, that others have mentioned it, about the significations of English in this movie itself. So how it is deployed is quite interesting. And what is seen as how we interpret that her colleagues and the school is neglecting her, is that she is shifted from teaching Shakespeare to grammar. So English as literature to English as a language of communication, a grammar. That is also quite interesting. I thought, what does it signify is quite interesting. I think these two things I wanted to bring it up. One is looking at the other community, turning our gaze towards the other community, not see them as individuals, but see it as a kind of a community, and see then what comment is happening on that community. And then the second one is about this language significations, English significations itself. Thank you.
Thank you. That was two fantastic points. I loved them, and I should have talked more about them in the course of my presentation, but I couldn't fit it all in. But all I want to say about the language issue is, of course, Aparna Sen has been constantly asked why, she's perhaps India's first, not just one of our early female directors. There was Sai Paranjape and Vijay Mehta, of course, which I should have said in my presentation, who were working before her, but who don't have a comparable substantial body of work to match hers. Now she's on to her 17th film, which is waiting for release. 17 just in terms of directorial films. And of course, there is several, about 60 or 70 films as an actress, if not more. I have not been so invested in her trajectory as an actress, but as a director, her work is, of course, very, very important to me. But her language is something that keeps changing with the film, but sometimes those decisions can be cosmetic. Like in 15 Park Avenue, the film could have been made in Hindi. You see a North Indian family, Mathurs, living in Calcutta, so they would talk amongst each other, possibly in Hindi, except that Shabana Azmi is shown as a physics professor in Presidency College, very anglicized, very snooty, not unlike Aparna Sen herself, perhaps. So, talking in English even with her mother, which can seem a bit forced sometimes. But here, the choice is completely organic. I have to say, it's an Anglo-Indian lady. She's a British. She's an English lady. The English is her language, if it is anyone's. And when the couple talk amongst each other, they talk in Bengali with English subtitles. So there's complete organic sort of melding of the linguistic registers in the film, and it doesn't strike one false note as far as I'm concerned. And I think that charge cannot be brought against her as far as this film is concerned. Later films, maybe Sonata again could have been made in Hindi, I feel. Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, perhaps because it was a Tamil Brahmin and a Bengali Muslim wildlife photographer, the lingua franca, the language of exchange would possibly be English with a smattering of Bengali or Hindi depending on where they were from. The Japanese wife, of course, again, it's accentuated on an international scale. It's Bengal and Japan, so that becomes their medium of exchange. But here, it is absolutely organic. And your other point is very interesting. If we take a sort of inverse look at the Bhadralok community, we see it, of course, in the students. They're representatives or they are wards of Bhadralok families, presumably. They're going to Pratt Memorial School. They are studying Shakespeare in school. They see him as possibly an antiquated relic. They have little patience for him. But when they're performing, of course, that takes on a different coloring from them. And if you hear the dialogue when Miss Stoneham is actually moving away, they say, "I thought Shakespeare was so boring," one of the students say. But now, that we're acting it out with a papier-mâché model of Globe Theatre on the desk, it seems like great fun. But the thing, Shomuresh and Nandita are also symptomatic of this impulse, of this impatience for a world order for which their interest and their enthusiasm is steadily waning thin. They are interested in these empty signifiers. Shomuresh is symptomatic of this, like the gramophone, like the music, like the paintings. But he's actually, he's interested in I hesitate to say cosmopolitan, but rich, well-heeled, upper middle class people with whom they party, which doesn't include any white people or Anglo-Indians in their midst. It's generally possibly not just Bengalis, but symptomatic of cosmopolitan Calcutta in early 1980. So would include many representative Indian communities who talk amongst each other in English, sing English songs, listen to English music, but is an elitist and an Anglophile crowd rather than being an Anglo-Indian crowd. So that move has already from Anglo-Indian to Indo-Anglian has already begun with the party scene at the end of the film, which is extended 20 years later when Aparna Sen returned to English as a medium for her later films. So of course we can see the sort of not the malaise, but the wariness of the Bhadralok community for this community that was fast dwindling and for whom their patience is steadily wearing thin. And one could sort of invert the prism and then make it a study of the Bhadralok community sort of contrapuntally. That would be a very interesting exercise. I haven't thought of it consciously, except linking the dots from her students, present, former, and the institutions we see, the old age home where she goes to meet her brother, and the Pentecostal prayer house, the tailor's shop she crosses were actually places where the Anglo-Indian community lived and thrived once upon a time, but now of course have given way to a more syncretic, perhaps, melding of other communities like Jews, Armenians, and perhaps more impoverished communities from other parts of India, and now from where sort of the living traces of Anglo-Indians have been all but completely erased. So that history is also being traced through the film. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tarkeshwar, and thank you, Subhankar. Any more questions, comments? Okay, it's nearing 11 now, and we've come to the end.
Geeta,
Yeah,
just to thank, if Basav is still there, just to thank him for giving us a good watchable copy of the
yes,
film.
Thank you.
Basav,
Thank you. And with the best,
yes,
and with the best audio. Thank you, Basav. The best audio. I paid
Most
very keen
welcome, most
attention to the sound. I paid very keen attention to the sound when I listened to it again. It immeasurably enriched the viewing experience because, like I said, Hitendra Ghosh and Banraj Bhatia worked very carefully on the music and the sound. And when we get a good print like this, we can recover their sort of archival labor. So thank you. Thank you.
yes, yeah. Thank you, Basav, for that. Otherwise, we had the film in 4 different parts. So thank you, Basav. And thank you, Subhankar, very much for this extremely rich, insights. And thank you all for all those who participated in the discussion. Thank you for logging in. And we meet again next Saturday, 9 p.m. Good night, everybody. And thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thank you very much. Great discussion. Thanks, Nikhila.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.